You are losing $380 inside your freezer right now, and not one brand in that frozen food aisle ever told you how to stop it. Your grandmother, standing in a farmhouse kitchen outside Lancaster, Pennsylvania, in 1941, kept pork fresh for 11 months using nothing but butcher paper and a 10-cent bag of salt. Number 7 on this list kept a woman's family in Louisiana eating home-cooked meals all winter on $20 of summer produce. And the method was nearly erased when the packaging industry rewrote the rules in the 1960s. Number 14 makes the $5 tube of break and bake cookie dough at Walmart completely pointless. And number 1 is the single habit that saved Depression-era families more money than any coupon book ever printed. The frozen food aisle is a $67 billion industry built on one bet that you forgot everything your grandmother knew about a freezer. Subscribe and stay with me because we are counting down 25 freezer secrets that were common knowledge in every American kitchen before Swanson, Tyson, and Birdseye convinced you to stop thinking and start buying. Here is number 25. Number 25 starts at a fish market in Gloucester, Massachusetts in 1943. A fisherman's wife named Edna Cabot had more cod and haddock than her family could eat in a week. And by day 4, the ice box smelled like the dock at low tide. So Edna filled a bowl with ice water and a tablespoon of salt, dipped each fillet, set it on a sheet pan, and slid it into her freezer for 30 minutes. She pulled it out and dipped it again, 4 times, until each piece of fish wore a thin shell of ice like a glove. That ice glaze sealed out every molecule of air. No freezer burn, no smell, no waste. Write this part down. Gorton's sells a box of frozen fish sticks for $5.49, and 60% of that box by weight is breading, not fish. Edna's method keeps fresh fish perfect for 10 months. A pound of fresh haddock on sale costs $4. A pound of Gorton's processed fish costs $9. The USDA confirms ice glazing is still the commercial standard for high-end seafood. You just were never taught to do it at home. At number 24, the trick is almost embarrassingly simple. A farm wife named Dorothy Engstrom in Ames, Iowa in 1937. Dorothy kept chickens, and in spring, those hens laid more eggs than her family of 7 could eat. She cracked a dozen into a muffin tin, dropped a pinch of salt into each cup, and set the tin in her freezer. 2 hours later, she popped out 12 frozen egg pucks, dropped them in a paper sack, and had eggs clear through November. Scrambled, baked, used in custard. No difference anyone could taste. The salt keeps the proteins from turning rubbery. Conagra sells egg beaters for $4.29 a carton, a product that exists only because you were never told that a real egg freezes perfectly. When eggs hit $3.80 a dozen last winter, families threw money away because they thought you could not freeze an egg. Dorothy knew better in 1937. A dozen eggs frozen in March and used in September cost exactly what they cost in March. That saves $7 a month during price spikes, and it will save yours the same. Number 23 is the one that will change your weekly grocery bill the most. And it started with a woman named Rosa Ferraro in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1946. Rosa bought block cheese, cheddar, mozzarella, provolone, whenever the Italian grocer on her street marked it down. She took each block home, grated every ounce of it on a box grater, tossed the shreds in a bowl with a tablespoon of cornstarch, and packed them flat in wax paper bags in her freezer. The cornstarch absorbed the moisture and kept every shred separate. You have probably done the opposite your whole life. Kraft sells a bag of pre-shredded mozzarella for $4.49. They add cellulose powder Wood pulp to keep the shreds from clumping. You are paying $4.49 for cheese dusted with sawdust. Rose's method gives you the same convenience with real cheese at half the price. A 2-pound block of store-brand cheddar on sale costs $3.98 and fills 3 freezer bags. That is $1.33 per bag versus $4.49. Sargento and Kraft need you to never learn this. Cornell's Food Science Lab confirmed that cornstarch tossed cheese loses 0 quality after 6 months frozen. Number 22 starts in a boarding house kitchen in Savannah, Georgia in 1940. A cook named Lucille Odom kept cream on hand for biscuits, gravy, and coffee. But a pint spoiled in 3 days. So Lucille stirred a tablespoon of sugar into each cup of cream, poured it into an ice cube tray, and froze it. 1 cube in coffee, 2 in gravy, 4 in a biscuit recipe. The sugar lowers the freezing point just enough to prevent the fat from separating. Kraft Heinz sells Cool Whip for $3.29 a tub, a product made of water, corn syrup, and hydrogenated oil with almost no actual cream. Lucille had real cream in her freezer for less than Cool Whip costs, and it lasted 4 months. Buy heavy cream on markdown at Kroger, a quart for $2 instead of $4.50. Freeze it Lucille's way. $6 a month back in your pocket. Number 21 is one your grandmother would have called plain common sense. In Tupelo, Mississippi, in 1951, a mother of 6 named Hazel Purvis watched milk prices climb every summer while her children drank a gallon a day. Hazel started buying 3 gallons every time the price dipped and freezing 2. She poured off a cup from each jug to leave headroom, sealed them, and laid them on their sides in the freezer. When she thawed one 2 weeks later, she shook it hard for 30 seconds, and it tasted the same. That was 1951. Look at milk prices today. The fat separates during freezing, and the shaking puts it back together. Dean Foods in the dairy aisle are built on the assumption that you will buy milk at whatever this week's price happens to be. Hazel refused. She bought at the low and froze the surplus. A gallon of whole milk swings between $2.80 and $4.60 depending on the week. Freezing 2 gallons at the low saved Hazel's family over $11 a month. The USDA says frozen milk keeps perfectly for 3 months. Number 20 is what your grocery store is counting on you not knowing. In a farmhouse outside Topeka, Kansas, in 1939, a canning club president named Mabel Strauss taught every wife in her county a 90-second rule that made the entire frozen vegetable aisle unnecessary. Boil a pot of water. Drop in your green beans, your broccoli, your peas. Whatever came out of the garden that morning. 90 seconds, not 2 minutes. Pull them out and plunge them straight into a bowl of ice water. Dry them on a towel. Bag them flat. Freeze. Those vegetables will taste like July in the middle of January. Blanching kills the enzymes that turn frozen vegetables mushy and bitter. Skip that step, and your home frozen beans taste like cardboard. In a month. Mabel knew this in 1939. Birdseye sells a bag of frozen green beans for $2.79. Mabel's method on garden produce or farmer's market seconds costs less than 50 cents a bag. If you grow even a small garden, blanching and freezing saves you over $200 a year. That is not an estimate. That is USD home preservation data. Now take a step back and think about what you just heard in those first 6 entries. You learned that eggs freeze, milk freezes, cheese freezes, cream freezes, fish wears an ice glove, and your garden outlasts any bag in the frozen aisle. Every single one of those methods costs almost nothing. Every single one of those methods was common knowledge before 1960, and every single one was replaced by a product with a barcode and a markup. The American frozen food industry hit $67 billion in revenue last year. The USDA estimates that American households throw away 30% of the food in their freezers, not because it went bad, but because nobody taught them to store it properly. That is $114 per household per year thrown into the trash on freezer burn alone. Tyson Foods reported a 38% gross margin on frozen products in their last earnings call. Birdseye is owned by Conagra, which spent over $100 million on advertising last year, telling you that their bag of frozen peas is more convenient than the ones in your own garden. It is not more convenient. It is more profitable. And the moment you learn to blanch a vegetable and wrap a fish, their entire business model starts to crack. So let us keep going, because the next 19 secrets are the ones they really do not want you to hear. McCormick sells a half-ounce jar of dried basil for $4.99. Dried herbs lose 40% of their potency within 6 months of opening. Number 19 makes that jar pointless. A Greek immigrant woman named Eleni Papadakis in Tarpon Springs, Florida, in 1953, grew basil, oregano, mint, and parsley in clay pots outside her kitchen door. Every fall, she chopped those herbs fine, packed them into ice cube trays, poured olive oil over the top, and froze them. 1 cube dropped into a skillet was a finished seasoning, herb and fat together, ready to go. It sounds wrong until you see the savings. The oil seals out air and locks in the volatile compounds that give fresh herbs their flavor. Eleni's method gives you 16 cubes of real fresh basil from a $3 grocery store bunch. That jar on your spice rack is not saving you time. It is costing you flavor and money at the same time. Do not skip number 18. A strawberry farmer's wife named June Oakes in Plant City, Florida, in 1948, watched her neighbors buy back their own county's berries from a freezer case at twice the price. June knew something Dole does not print on the bag. She spread fresh berries on a cookie sheet lined with wax paper, not touching each other, froze them for 2 hours, then swept them into a paper sack. Every berry stayed separate. No clump, no ice block, no crushed mess at the bottom of the bag. Freezing them individually first prevents ice crystals from forming between the berries and welding them together. Dole frozen strawberries cost $3.99 a pound at Walmart. Pick your own strawberries in season, run $1.50 a pound in most of the country. June's method turns cheap seasonal fruit into a year-round supply at less than half the store price. A family that freezes 10 pounds in June saves $25 before Thanksgiving. Number 17 answers something every home cook has wondered about. In a bakery apartment above a shop in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in 1944, a baker's wife named Ilse Bronner had access to more bread than any family could eat before it went stale. Ilse sliced every loaf the day it came upstairs, placed a strip of wax paper between every 2 slices, slid the loaf into a bag, and froze it. Any morning she wanted toast, she pulled 2 slices straight from the freezer. No thawing needed. And this is the detail that made me include this one. Sarah Lee sells a loaf of frozen artisan bread for $5.49. Wonder Bread costs $4.69. Bakery bread on the day-old rack at any supermarket costs $1.50 to $2. Buy it marked down, freeze it Ilse's way, and you have bread that tastes better than Sara Lee at a third of the price. The wax paper stops moisture from migrating between slices, which is what causes them to fuse into a solid frozen brick. Every loaf you rescue from the marked down rack saves you $3. Most people never hear about number 16. A boarding house cook named Alma Jansen in Omaha, Nebraska, in 1946 never bought a can of broth in her life. Every time she roasted a chicken, she simmered the carcass for 4 hours, let the stock cool, poured it into muffin tins, froze the pucks, popped them out, and kept them in a bag. 2 pucks in a pot of rice, 3 in a soup, 1 melted into a pan sauce. Gelatin from the bones sets when cold, making each puck solid enough to handle and portion perfectly. Swanson sells a 32-ounce carton of chicken broth for $3.49. It contains salt, water, and flavor extracted in an industrial pressure cooker. No gelatin, no body, no richness. Alma got 12 cups of real stock from 1 leftover chicken carcass that was headed for the trash. That is $10 of Swanson from something you already paid for and were about to throw away. Number 15 is the entry that changes how you buy meat for the rest of your life. A butcher's wife named Pearl Novak in Kansas City, Missouri, in 1938, wrapped every cut that came home from her husband's shop the same way. Tight in butcher paper first, pressed against the meat with no air pockets. Then a second layer of wax paper over that, folded and sealed at every seam. That double wrap blocked oxygen completely. This next detail is what costs you real money. Tyson sells vacuum-sealed chicken breasts for $7.99 a pound. Regular chicken breasts on sale at Aldi or Walmart dropped to $1.99 a pound. Pearl's double wrap method keeps that sale chicken perfect in a home freezer for 10 to 12 months. The same shelf life Tyson claims for their vacuum-sealed package. The difference is $5 a pound. For a family that eats 4 pounds of chicken a week, that is $20 a week. That is over $1,000 a year. Food Saver sells a vacuum sealer for $80 and replacement bags at $9 per roll because they need you to believe that butcher paper does not work. Pearl knew it worked in 1938. Number 14 puts $31 back in a family's pocket every single month. A church bake sale organizer named Virginia Kessler in Terre Haute, Indiana, in 1955, baked 6 dozen cookies every Christmas, every Easter, and every church social without ever feeling rushed. Her secret was time. Not more of it, but better use of it. Virginia made a full batch of dough, scooped it into balls on a lined sheet pan, froze the balls solid, and swept them into a bag. Any evening she needed cookies, she put 12 frozen dough balls on a pan, added 2 minutes to the bake time, and pulled out cookies that were chewier and more consistent than fresh mixed dough produced. Nestle Toll House Break and Bake cookie dough costs $4.99 for 24 cookies. Virginia's full batch from scratch, flour, butter, sugar, eggs, chocolate chips, costs about $3 for 48 cookies. That is 10 cents a cookie versus 21 cents. She baked twice as many for 40% less money, and the dough kept in her freezer for 4 months. Number 13 is the one that replaced an entire freezer aisle in a single afternoon. A working mother named Shirley Novotny in Akron, Ohio, in 1952, had 5 children and a husband on the second shift at Goodyear. She could not cook from scratch on a Tuesday night at 6 o'clock. So on Sundays, Shirley lined her casserole dishes with aluminum foil, leaving extra hanging over the edges, built her casseroles right in the foil, and froze them. Once solid, she lifted the foil wrap block right out of the dish, wrapped it tight, stacked it in the freezer, and had her dish free for the next one. Tuesday night, she dropped a frozen block back into the same dish, peeled off the foil, and baked it. Stuffer's lasagna costs $8.99 for a single tray. Marie Callender's chicken pot pie runs $12.99. Shirley made 5 freezer casseroles every Sunday for about $2 each in ingredients. 5 dinners, $10 total, versus $50 or more from the Stauffer's case. The foil lining is what makes the whole system possible. Without it, your dishes are trapped in the freezer and your kitchen stops working. Here is something the frozen food industry would prefer you never calculate. In 1955, Swanson sold the first TV dinner for 98 cents. Adjusted for inflation, that is $11.40 today. A Stuffer's frozen lasagna costs $8.99. A Hungry Man dinner costs $4.49. The portions got smaller. The ingredients got cheaper. The prices stayed almost the same relative to what a family earns. The American Frozen Food Institute, the lobbying arm of every major frozen brand, spent $4.2 million in Washington last year. Their job is not to make your food better. Their job is to make sure home economics never comes back. In 1960, 92% of American public schools taught a class that included food preservation. By 2006, that number had dropped to 5%. The USDA once published a free pamphlet called Home Freezing of Fruits and Vegetables. It was discontinued in 1994, replaced by nothing. The knowledge did not become obsolete. It did not stop working. It was simply no longer distributed. And every year it stayed out of classrooms, the frozen food aisle grew by another $1 billion. What you are watching right now is the class they stopped teaching. So let us keep going. Number 12 takes us to the back kitchen of a family restaurant in Sacramento, California, in 1949. The Ng family cooked 50 pounds of rice a day and could not afford to throw a single grain away. Mei Lin Ng spread leftover rice on a sheet pan to cool it fast, portioned it into paper-lined bags, pressed each bag flat, and froze them stacked like files in a drawer. Anytime an order came in, she pulled a bag, cracked the frozen rice into a hot wok, and had fried rice in 4 minutes. The flat shape is the trick. It thaws evenly and heats without mushy spots. Uncle Ben's, owned by Mars Incorporated, sells a microwavable pouch of rice for $2.99. 1 pouch, 1.5 cups. A 20-pound bag of rice at Costco costs $12 and makes over 40 portions. Frozen Mei Lin's Way, that is 30 cents per portion versus $2.99. Multiply that across 3 meals a week, and you are looking at over $100 a year in savings on rice alone. Number 11 saves you $8 a month on an ingredient that costs $1.29. An Italian grandmother named Carmela De Luca in Newark, New Jersey, in 1947, used tomato paste in almost everything: ragu, braciola, soup, meatballs. But a 6-ounce can yields 12 tablespoons, and most recipes call for one or two. The rest sat in the ice box and turned black in a week. So Carmela dolloped tablespoon-sized drops onto a plate lined with wax paper, froze them solid, and tossed the little pucks into a jar in her freezer. One puck was 1 tablespoon. No measuring, no waste, no open can rotting in the back of the fridge. Freezing in small portions prevents oxidation of the exposed paste. Hunt's, owned by Conagra, sells that little can for $1.29. Most families use 2 tablespoons and throw the rest away. That means you are paying $1.29 to use 16 cents worth of paste. Carmela got 12 uses from every can. If you cook Italian 3 nights a week, that waste adds up to $8 a month straight into the trash. At number 10, a Florida Citrus Grove worker's wife named Ada Mae Prescott in Lakeland, Florida, in 1943, had a problem most cooks would envy: too many oranges, lemons, and limes to use before they shriveled. So Ada Mae zested each fruit first, juiced it second, poured the juice into ice cube trays with the zest sprinkled on top, and froze the lot. 1 cube was 1 tablespoon of juice plus a pinch of fresh zest into a glass of water, into a marinade, into a cake batter. I had to verify this twice before including it. The zest contains limonene and volatile oils that begin breaking down within 48 hours of cutting. Frozen zest holds those oils intact for a year. Minute Maid, owned by Coca-Cola, sells a can of frozen concentrate for $2.49 that tastes nothing like real citrus. Ada Mae's method turns a 5-pound bag of seasonal oranges at $3 into 60 cubes of real juice and zest. That is 5 cents a cube. That is free flavor for a year. Number 9 sounds impossible until you understand the chemistry. A fisherman's wife named Opal Thibodeau in Biloxi, Mississippi in 1945 wrapped fresh-caught redfish in 3 layers of dampened newspaper, slid the bundle into a bread bag, and froze it. 6 months later, she unwrapped fish that smelled like the Gulf and flaked clean off the bone. The dampness is not optional. Dry newspaper does nothing. The wet paper creates a micro layer of ice against the flesh that mimics Edna's ice glaze method from number 25, but without the repeated dipping. Gorton's, the largest frozen fish brand in America, charges $6.99 for a box that is 60% breading by weight. Their revenue topped $600 million last year on products that contain more wheat flour than actual fish. Fresh Gulf fish on sale at any coastal market runs $4 a pound. 100% fish, 0% a filler. Opal's newspaper method kept it freezer perfect for half a year. Number 8 might be the most satisfying entry on this whole list. In Council Bluffs, Iowa, in 1940, a farm wife named Bess Holmgren had 80 ears of sweet corn from her garden, and 4 days before the sugar started converting to starch. Bess shucked every ear, boiled them on the cob for 4 minutes, plunged them into cold well water, then stood at her counter with a sharp knife and cut the kernels straight into a roasting pan. She bagged the kernels flat, froze them, and ate August corn in February. Stop and think about what that means. Blanching on the cob first preserves the sugar. Cutting after prevents the kernels from getting waterlogged and mushy. Reverse that order and you ruin the corn. Green Giant sells a bag of frozen corn for $2.49. Bess filled 8 freezer bags from a $3 dozen ears of roadside corn. That is 38 cents a bag. She saved over $20 a season, and her corn tasted better than anything in a commercial freezer because it went from stalk to freezer in under 2 hours, not 2 weeks, like the supply chain demands. Number 7 works because of surface area. A flat bag of frozen sauce thaws in 20 minutes in a bowl of warm water, while a round container takes 2 hours. A Cajun cook named Beulah Arsenault in Lafayette, Louisiana, in 1950, figured this out without ever calling it thermodynamics. Beulah made gravy and roux-based sauces in batches big enough for a church hall. Whatever the family did not eat that day, she poured into bread bags, pressed flat, no thicker than a magazine, and laid them on a cookie sheet in the freezer. Once frozen, she filed them upright between strips of cardboard like records in a crate. Beulah could pull a bag of gumbo base at 5:30 and have dinner on the table by 6. Ragu and Bertolli, both owned by different arms of the processed food machine, sell jarred pasta sauce for $3.99 each. Beulah's Sunday sauce in bulk cost about $1 per bag. At 3 jars replaced a week, that is $9 saved every 7 days. Over a year, that is $468 on pasta sauce alone. Here is number 6, and it is the one most people learn too late. A bakery helper named Cecil Rollins in St. Louis, Missouri, in 1935, watched his boss throw away spotted bananas every morning until Cecil suggested something that changed the shop's bottom line. Peel them, break them in half, bag them, freeze them. When batter day came, Cecil pulled frozen bananas straight from the freezer and dropped them in the mixer. No thawing, no mashing. The freezer did the work. Frozen banana halves collapse into a paste the second the mixer hits them. Compare that to the box on your counter right now. Freezing ruptures the cell walls in the banana, converting starch to sugar and creating a softer, sweeter fruit that is chemically better for baking than a fresh banana. Betty Crocker, owned by General Mills, sells a box of banana cake mix for $3.49. The main ingredient you need for banana bread from scratch is a banana you are about to throw in the trash. Cecil's method turns waste into a free ingredient that outperforms the boxed version. Every banana you throw away is 50 cents of baking you already paid for. Now stop and think about what just happened in the last 14 entries. You were taught to freeze herbs in oil, berries on a sheet, bread between wax paper, stock in muffin tins, meat in double wrap, cookie dough in balls, casseroles in foil, rice flat, tomato paste in pucks, citrus in cubes, fish in newspaper, corn off the cob, sauce in bags, and bananas in halves. 14 methods. 0 of them require any product that was not already in your kitchen in 1940. Not one specialized bag, not one $80 vacuum sealer, not one brand name storage container. And that is the entire point. Food Saver, owned by Newell Brands, sells a vacuum sealing system for $79.99 plus $9 per roll of replacement bags. The product exists to solve a problem that wax paper, butcher paper, aluminum foil, and ice cube trays already solved 80 years ago. American consumers spend over $500 million a year on food storage products. Your grandmother spent about $6 a year on wax paper and butcher paper from the general store, and her food lasted just as long. The product aisle is not innovation. It is the monetization of forgetting. Every method on this list proves it. Let us finish this. Number 5 takes us to Butte, Montana in 1942, where a mining family wife named Sylvia Popovich blanched and froze enough potatoes every September to last until April. Peel them, cut them into whatever shape you want. Fries, cubes, hash brown shreds, and drop them into boiling water for exactly 3 minutes. Pull them out straight into ice water, drain, pat dry, spread on a cookie sheet in a single layer. Freeze for 2 hours and bag them. That 3-minute blanch stops the enzymatic browning that turns raw frozen potatoes black. Or Ida, owned by Kraft Heinz, sells a bag of frozen French fries for $4.29. A 10-pound bag of russet potatoes at Walmart costs $3.98 and fills 6 freezer bags. That is 66 cents a bag versus $4.29. Sylvia did not need Ore-Ida, and neither do you. Progresso sells a canister of breadcrumbs for $3.49. You probably bought one last month. Number 4 is the entry that makes that canister the last one you ever buy. A widow named Opal Strickland in Charleston, West Virginia, in 1944, kept a bag in her freezer she called the scrap bag. Every bread heel, every stale roll, every leftover biscuit went into the scrap bag stale roll. Every leftover biscuit went into the bag. When it was full, usually every 2 or 3 weeks, Opal thawed the contents, tore them into pieces, and ran them through a hand grater. She spread the crumbs on a sheet pan, dried them in a low oven for 10 minutes, and scooped them back into the bag in the freezer. Freezing the scraps locks the moisture content at the moment of storage, so the crumbs dry evenly and toast perfectly every time. And that is where your grocery bill quietly bleeds. Opal's scrap bag cost her nothing. It was made entirely from food she had already bought and was about to discard. A family that uses breadcrumbs twice a week saves over $7 a month. That is $84 a year on breadcrumbs you were already throwing away. Number 3 is not a freezer trick. It is the reason every other trick on this list actually works. A grandmother in a clapboard house outside Roanoke, Virginia, in 1948, kept a 3x5 index card taped to her chest freezer with a stubby pencil on a string beside it. Every time something went in, she wrote it down. What it was, the date, how many. Every time something came out, she crossed it off. That card was the entire inventory system. No mystery packages, no forgotten pork chops from last Thanksgiving, no bags of unlabeled soup discovered 8 months later coated in ice crystals. Food Saver Markets, a 200-count box of freezer labels for $12.99. The label industry exists because people lost the habit of keeping a card on the door. The USDA estimates that families throw away 35% of what goes into their freezers. Not because it's spoiled, but because they forgot it was there. One index card and a pencil eliminate that number almost entirely. The tool costs nothing. The savings are hundreds of dollars a year. Number 2 is the system that made everything else on this list possible. In Youngstown, Ohio, in 1951, a factory worker's wife named Helen Zielinski cooked every Sunday like she was feeding two families, because she was. Whatever Helen made for dinner, she made double. One batch on the table, the second into foil-lined dishes, into the freezer labeled with her card and pencil. Monday through Friday, Helen pulled a frozen dinner out and reheated it. Tell someone about this one tonight. Lean Cuisine sells a single frozen meal for $3.49. It contains 280 calories, a paragraph of preservatives, and enough sodium to make a cardiologist wince. Helen's frozen Sunday pot roast was real food, real portions, and enough for seconds. At $3.49 per tray times 5 weeknights, Lean Cuisine costs a family $17.45 a week. Helen's doubled recipe cost $4 extra and fed the family 5 nights. That is $13 a week saved. $56 a month. $672 a year. On real food, not processed trays. Number 1 is not a single trick. It is the thing that made your grandmother's entire kitchen work. In 1934, in the middle of the worst economic collapse this country had ever seen, a woman in a house outside Decatur, Illinois, her granddaughter told this story on a porch in 2019, fed a family of 9 on a factory worker's wage. She did it because her freezer was not a place where food went to die. It was a savings account. Vegetable scraps went into a bag and became stock on Saturday. Bread ends became breadcrumbs and stuffing. Overripe fruit was peeled and frozen for cobblers. Meat bought on sale was wrapped, labeled, and rotated like inventory in a shop. Nothing entered that kitchen and left as garbage. Nothing was bought at full price if it could be bought on sale and frozen. Nothing was thrown away if it could be turned into something else. Her freezer was full of decisions, hundreds of small decisions made across a year that added up to a family that ate well on almost nothing. You have the time to do what she did. You always did. They just needed you to believe otherwise. The frozen food industry spends $3 billion a year on advertising to make sure you never remember. Number 25 alone, that ice glaze on fish, saves the average family over $60 a year. Number 15, the double wrap butcher paper method can cut your meat bill by $1,000 if you buy every sale and freeze smart. And number 2, Helen's Sunday system puts $672 a year back on the table in real food. Tell me in the comments, what is the one food you always thought could not be frozen? Next video, we are covering 20 old-fashioned pantry secrets that eliminate half the canned goods aisle. And number 4 involves a Depression-era vinegar trick the pickle industry tried to bury. Subscribe so you do not miss it. Grandma knew. Now you do too.